Ex-homeless Redditors. What was the scariest thing that you ever saw on the streets? NSFW. Cold weather. I thought I was going to die one night. I was so cold. I remember waking up thinking you need to move or you are going to die. Snow. I'm a big, scary dude, so I never had trouble with people picking on me or whatever. In that sense the streets were safe to me. But seeing snow for the first time that year just made me cry and panic. It was too early for snow. I wasn't ready for that type of cold and was hoping to be on my feet again before the winter came. Beautiful thing like snow just fricked me up in so many ways. Was homeless for a summer and an acquaintance through the party scene of the town invited me to crash on her couch. Woke up in the middle of the night to her screaming into her phone about how they are out to get her and are setting the world up for destruction. Pretended like I was still asleep and got out of there the next day real quick. There is a drainage ditch in my area that the local homeless people tend to bed down in. A few years ago, when I found myself destitute, I spent one night down there. That night I witnessed a Molotov get thrown into another dude's spot, which led to a huge fire that ran rampant through the area. Yeah, I bought a tent the next day and started camping in the local mountains. People who had been homeless way longer than me. Trust me. There is nothing scarier on the streets than the meth couple who this has been their day in and day out for thousands of days. I was just sleeping around where other guys in my city sleep. Then just see some teens stabbing one of the homeless guys multiple times. Ran away from there. Never turned back. Biggest thing, 5 feet 3, 115 pounds, was how often people try to abduct you. That and how often people try to serve you tampered food. The teenagers trying to get clout by assaulting pranking you is another one. I had been homeless for a couple weeks now and had made friends with this couple. They seemed pretty chill but had a bit of a drinking problem. Anyway, one night I was sleeping. Could hear some commotion going on. Couldn't make out who it was or what was going on. Until my buddy comes and sits on my sleeping bag. Blood pumping out of his neck. Like full on. Every time his heart beat it would splurt out. Not under huge pressure, but it was pretty bad. I asked him what happened and he said he think his missus had cut his throat with a Stanley blade. He was so drunk he was not aware of how bad his injury was. And insisted I did not call an ambulance. So I called the police, they called the ambulance. I see the dude a couple days later. Still homeless. Scar on his neck. He's ever so grateful the nurse had told him how lucky he was. He was literally a couple millimeters away from dying that night. Edit, I'm no longer homeless. This all happened about 6 years ago now. I no longer speak to him. This is another long story. She was arrested but not charged. Last year she committed suicide, so she's no longer with us. Everyone is gonna try to steal from your ass, so watch your poop. Keep your mouth shut and find a good place that is desolated from nocturnal animals and assholes. So I lived in my car, but I remember seeing this woman and talking to her outside a store when I was just chilling eating some food, and she told me she had been homeless literally her entire life and had never sleep on a proper bed in her life. I asked how old she was. She told me she was 53. It was scary to me because I realized that that could have easily been me. I think about that woman every single day. I was once homeless for 4-5 days a few years back when I got lost in another city in Turkey where my family lost me. I had to go to homeless shelters inside it and have my bag, had my phone, money, card, keys, ID, important stuff, and it was when the Turkish coup happened. I saw people being beaten and sometimes to death. Gunfire. Bombs. Gas. I didn't have anyone to help since the police were busy. Everyone was busy. The scariest moment was when a military officer threw a few Molotov cocktails at the crowd. My cousins found me near the mosque they visited at midnight. I was sleeping behind a closed shop on a bench. I am fine and doing well, thank God. After a meal at a local shelter one night I fell asleep in a park. I hated being around there at night because some of the other homeless would rob you. One guy got knifed a week earlier and I needed to GTFO. So I started to make my way out of the area, taking alleyways as not to attract the drunks who would throw poop at, beat up and generally harass the destitute. I heard a commotion and decided to investigate and saw this crazy animal of man, naked from the waist down, on top of someone, I assume a woman, thrusting on top of her. Every couple of seconds he would stop to throw a punch. The woman was unconscious, completely limp and very bloody. I yelled out to him and he turned to look at me. I have seen a lot of bad things in my life, but the look in his eyes was beyond animalistic. He was filthy, but in the little light from the street lamps his eyes glowed with rage and insanity. Scared the poop out of me. So afraid that I took off, ran to nearest payphone, 1993, and dialed 911. I did not go back. I have felt like such a coward and have no idea what happened to either one. I truly hope she's okay and he is dead. All sorts of the usual poop. Dicey situations with dicey people. But the one where I was spine-chilling terrified. I had found a seemingly nice quiet cut in the woods. Shade. Private. I'm set. I wake up to a most guttural yell at 2 a.m. A pack of feral cats that the adjacent 50-year-old Rainman had lured to his property with cans of wet food. They stood on the fence yowling, eyes reflecting as we started the other down. Waking up to a shotgun being pointed directly at my head. I wasn't truly homeless but had no money or bank card and was trying to get back to my parents following nearly being strangled to death by my ex. The actual fight happened whilst we were out, so I had no spare, no clothes. I'd left my wallet at his and only had a dying phone on me. I tried getting money for a train but only really managed enough for a bus fare to the next town and decided to try hitchhiking. Late into the night I gave up and managed to sneak into a barn where I was able to get comfortable enough to sleep. Turns out I didn't close the door enough and the farmer found me in the morning after taking his gun to investigate. He woke me up, I think he coughed loudly, with the gun painted at me, and I nearly pooped myself. It asked me what I thought I was doing in his barn and quizzed me on how I got in. He asked to see my arms before he lowered the gun and he started chatting. He was quite nice though, and after talking to him for a while he took me back to his house and fed me and let me have a shower. A woman giving birth at a bus terminal. I was homeless in Hawaii for a month after I got out of the army. Nothing I saw was ever like ho poop in Madai. But there are a lot of homeless meth heads wandering the streets. I watched people having arguments with a spoon they were holding. People eating sand at the beach. People wearing weak old poop caked pants. Meth is freaking wild. Stick to weed and shrooms. I was working in a mountain town and couldn't afford rent, even with 2 jobs. One night I was wasted after work. Me and a work friend were always there by ourselves closing, so the bar was free game. Left work at 2 a.m, walked the hour and a half back to my tent outside of town, while being stalked by a mountain lion. I assume I looked injured and could be an easy meal. It was terrifying. I had a digital camera with me, so I just kept pointing it in the area of the ridge where I could hear it walking and flashed repeatedly. Made it home safe. Another night after closing. Different campsite. I must have smelled like a huge gyro after working a double at Pitters in Paradise. Got into my sleeping bag in my tent. I was just about to doze off when I heard big crunches of a black bear sniffing me out. I was frozen with terror. The bear put his about against the nylon inches above my head. Hot steam on my face. I had pulled the sleeping bag up to my cheeks, petrified, when I slapped the bear's nose above my forehead. It was an involuntary reaction and I felt stupid, but I spooked the bear and it took off. I got an apartment with some friends soon after. Not what I saw. What I heard. If that counts. For a while I slept in an empty warehouse. I'm in the UK. So it was a huge Victorian building with about 6 floors. I slept on the 3rd or 4th floor. Out of the way of casual intruders, drunks and prostitutes use that space. And one night I heard a load of shouting and a female screaming from the ground floor. Now I was 16. A junkie and about 120 pounds. So I wasn't in any position to do much. But I crept down the steps to see what was happening. By the time I got there, the place was empty and the noise had stopped, so I went back upstairs. I found out the next day they found a body in the wasteland outside. Turns out the woman was a prostitute. They assumed her client stabbed her after a struggle and she'd made a run for it before he caught her and finished the job. Always wonder if I'd been able to help. But I'd have probably got stabbed too. I'm a woman in my early 20s. Not my brightest decision. But I slept in my car for several weeks. When I was completely out of money. Every night I parked in a small cul-de-sac, as far as I knew. The area was office only. So I didn't take anybody's parking lot, and in the morning I left. I worked a lot. So usually I slept like a log. One night though I woke up. Feeling anxious for some reason. I looked up and saw a softly illuminated window right above me. Nice. Warm light as if from a grandma bedside lamp. I freaked out a bit and fumbled for my keys. I better sit the rest of the night out at McDonald's or something. Then I noticed a silhouette not far away. A man was standing still and watching me. He didn't knock on my window glass. Didn't try to talk or anything. He was just watching. I booked it out of that cul-de-sac real quick. You know. The thing that freaks me out the most is not even the fact that he could assault or rob me then. But the realization that he may have watched me every other night. But I was too tired to notice that earlier. This isn't remotely scary. It's more just freaked up. After we lost our home. We stayed in a motel for a while, but due to occupancy rules I slept in the car in the parking lot. One night a woman parks next to me in the lot. And the security guard shows up. And they literally spent the next 3 hours getting high. Talking. And then fricking in the car. The entire time I'm in the next parking space trying to ignore them and look at my phone. The scariest thing I saw was a man named Tony T. Apparently he had been a cokehead for years but had to keep a job to support his habit. He had received a huge settlement. Over $500K. At which point he decided that he never had to work again. He lived on the streets and smoked cocaine all day. The best way to describe him is Tuco from Breaking Bad. He was generous with his drugs so people would naturally want to be around him. But he was unpredictable and dangerous. I have tons of stories about him being crazy aggressive, but the last time I saw him he beat a man with a pipe for dropping a tiny crack rock in the dirt. We are talking like $20 worth of dope, and he probably either killed the guy or fricked him up for life. I tried to stop him and he threatened to turn on me. I walked out. Went to phone and called my sister to come get me. She helped me get my poop together and I never went back. That was 30 years ago. I saw a really angry bald man aggressively masturbating his flaccid pee-pee. TBH, that was probably the most scary thing. It's not scary in the traditional sense of horror, but in the context of our homelessness it was heart stopping. Me and my mother have been homeless on and off for about 5 years now. It was sometime in the last year when it happened to us. On some nights when we couldn't go to our spot under the time in dead center of town. If it was raining, for instance, we'd walk up the street to the local church and shift the trash cans so we could lay behind them out of sight to avoid the rain. On 1-2 occasions sometimes a cop would pull in the parking lot to either just sit for his shift or IDK maybe check the area. Either way, we had just settled in trying to be inconspicuous when a car pulls in. From the angle we were at, the headlights beamed directly on us. Could have sworn we heard a door shut and someone walking around, as they say, there for what felt like hours. When it was probably only about 5 minutes. We just bundled up in the sleeping bag and prayed no one was rounded these trash cans we set up. Whatever amount of time had passed, next thing we know the car U-turns out and we were good. But my god, does your stomach climb into your throat in that moment. It's a long story but not that interesting, but long story short, I grew up in a very sheltered home. Through a series of unfortunate events, haha, I became homeless. For someone who didn't know anything about the world. Seeing people use drugs openly, eat garbage, cry themselves to sleep on a park bench, kill themselves, etc. I grew up real quick. I wasn't really homeless. Booty had to live in my car on and off for a couple months. In a mountain town due to scarcity of work available at the time. Woke up in the middle of the night to a black bear that was curious trying to get in.
Hi there. Look, if you enjoyed the video, well, why not go ahead and hit that like and subscribe to Reddit Stories. In fact, if you want to see even more responses to this thread, well then, take a look. There's the link in the description below. And remember, show some love to those authors while you're there. And I look forward to seeing you next time.